Hello, wider listeners, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it is that time of the week where we dig underneath the headlines. We find that stuff that the mainstream media is not talking about. We activate, agitate, educate about issues here at the national, international, and quite local level, and give you that very specific leftist analysis that you really won't find anywhere else. Certainly not on Sinclair-owned News 3 or MLive. Nah. It is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. And as always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. No matter how dope, on point, or otherwise useful that analysis may be. So we're actually joined by a very special guest. We've got another agitator in training, or no, well, DJ actually. Go ahead, please introduce yourself to the listening public.
What's going on, Kalamazoo, Michigan? My name is Samuel Robinson. You've heard me before as part of the Western Herald Sports Hour. That show was done with Robert Tomlinson, and I'm back again here now. Kicking it in studio, doing some DJ training as mentioned before, kind of shadowing and kind of, I guess, guest appearing on Andy's show today.
Just out of curiosity, and this isn't going to be an in-depth interview, but do you consider yourself like a leftist, a political radical by any stretch of the imagination? Or?
Well, as people, if you know me, I think you would know. You
will get a grade on this, by the way.
Well,
if you are not communist or anarchist enough, I'm going to get out of my studio.
I tell you what, for the Western Herald's sake, I currently serve as the editor-in-chief of the Western Herald, so I'll try to remain unbiased, but I'll leave the leanings. I think we'll come to find out my.
We got jokes, folks. I'm just doing a little bit of razzing here. So
yeah, no, you're good. You'll come to find out.
Oh yeah, we've had people of all different kinds of political alignments and ideologies on our show. Actually, by the way, Mary Balkema, you still need to come on the show. She said she would like 2 years ago, still hasn't. So I cannot imagine why. Anyway, a little context. Mary Balkema is the county treasurer. Very, very Republican, conservative. Was a Trump delegate. So perhaps there is a reason, a little hesitation to come on the program. But I digress. So. Well, let's go ahead and start the show. I want to kind of follow up on an issue that we talked about last week, and we do have a very important update on that. So last week we talked a bit about Benton Harbor. So this is it really jumped into the news after our talk about it last week. And people are starting to pay attention, and hats off to all of the organizers. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. That happens on the show sometimes. Little summary. So the story last week is that the state of Michigan was going to close down Benton Harbor public schools. Of course, the Benton Harbor School Board and the students and the community were not particularly big fans of that idea.
Could imagine.
Oh, yeah. And also kind of made some points about, it's like, this seems a little dubious. Benton Harbor High School is one of the last remaining places in the Benton Harbor area that's lakefront property that isn't owned by a private business concern. So there was just a little bit of kind of pointed questioning towards the governor about why is this land being abolished or whatnot. So there was a hell of a lot of pushback towards it. A big ups, big props to all the folks in Benton Harbor who were organizing for the school board meeting that was jam-packed on Tuesday night. Actually, I watched some footage of it, like a full auditorium. That's not something you can say about most school board meetings in general, and also some local organizers made sure that there was some Kalamazoo solidarity in the room that night. Unfortunately, I could not be there. I had other obligations back here in town. But let's go ahead and see what were the fruits of that labor. This was published literally just earlier today, right before the show, and I wanted to read from it. This is the Detroit News, and they're talking about this. Whitmer in Benton Harbor amid outcry over school closure plan. This is written by Jennifer Chambers and literally published about an hour and a half ago. After hundreds of protesters rallied Tuesday night against a state plan to close Benton Harbor High School, Governor Gretchen Whitmer is meeting Wednesday with community members in southwest Michigan City. That's today. Whitmer, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, State Treasurer Rachel Eubanks, and State School Reform Officer Bill Pearson will listen, learn, and discuss a proposal that calls for the closure of the high school in exchange for providing transitional funding. Basically, the idea they're going to take all these high school students and ship them off to neighboring schools in the district. Again, one of the points we really brought up last week is, it always is low income, and particularly, majority, Benton Harbor is a majority black high school. It's, very dubious to me, and I'm sure a lot of you listening out there, that they would be the ones on the chopping block. Yeah. When in fact, this is a community that has really been under siege from a lot of different angles for a number of years now. And certainly is against what Governor Whitmer really campaigned on, trying to improve our schools and certainly not shut them down, and really gut the Benton Harbor of a very important community institution. So I digress. Going on. So far, school board members in Benton Harbor are refusing to accept the plan created by the governor and the state treasurer, and are demanding the state come back to the table to work out an agreement to keep the district, which is about $18.3 million in debt, whole, and its 1,800 students in their own schools. School officials invited Whitmer to a public meeting Tuesday night where about 450 people from across the state, including Detroit, Saginaw, Flint, and Kalamazoo, protest the plan. Whitmer did not attend but sent a representative. Stephen Mitchell, the district school board president, said the state backed the district into a corner with the plan it announced May 24th, which gave the district less than 2 weeks to decide the fate of 700 high school students. Mitchell said the district was told it must decide by Friday or the state will take other action. Mitchell said the board is asking for 2 additional weeks to discuss options for the district. A little bit of a side note here. Something I find interesting about this is, one of the big critiques and, huge issues with the last governor and government of Michigan was this kind of taking, Rick Snyder became famous or infamous, I guess you should say, for taking local control out of local people's hands. The emergency financial management bill, which notoriously led to the poisoning of Flint. But here we see, a governor who, if especially if she had any mandate, it was kind of in response to that amoral state intervention that we saw from Rick Snyder. She was elected with the votes of a lot of marginalized people, but especially marginalized people in Benton Harbor, as pushback against exactly this kind of maneuvering right here, this kind of action that says, because of budgetary concerns, we're going to take this decision out of your community. We're not going to work with it, and we're going to basically displace a bunch of your students into a culturally disparate environments. Again, they're not even, part of this plan is that they're going to kind of split all the students between neighboring districts, which again, it's Benton Harbor High School is a core part of the community over there. It is like gutting through the middle of the community when you do stuff like this. I don't know. Did you? Sorry. Did you have any comments, my good friend, or is good?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, I'm from Midland, so I don't know if you know the socioeconomic factors that play in there. But I was actually the middle school closest to downtown, whereas the newer, more executive parts of the city are more sprawled out. The central middle school and the high school that I went to is more in the in the city. The city of Midland, quote unquote. It's 40,000 people strong, so don't get city. But my middle school got shut down, and again it was looked at as the less than middle school. And when it happened, it's not the easiest thing to do for those students, for sure. It is not just we're going to a new school now. Like, no, your teachers aren't the same. Your lockers change. You get a new locker buddy, and I would imagine, as you get older, it probably is a little bit easier, but especially for those, 9th and 10th grade students, that's a huge adjustment, having to just get up and go somewhere else.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, it really gets to me is this idea that you make these decisions or present these ultimatums without having that community conversation. It reminds me of, I think it was about a year ago, we were talking about a very similar issue here in Kalamazoo, where the state was talking about shutting down the Washington Writers Academy, even though it had literally just spent millions of dollars on renovations. Like, this is right after it had, it now has this nice glass awning, and it's been completely redone. And just somebody in Lansing crunching some numbers without even, looking at the people who hold stake in that part of our community said, oh, well, you know what? Let's just close it down. So yeah, it's a problem. It is a problem that apparently is persisting even under the tenure of Governor Whitmer, which again is very is very disappointing for, I'm sure, a lot of the people who voted for her. And again, not to go down too far of a rabbit hole, but there is a huge problem with Governor Whitmer would not be the governor without the votes of people of Benton Harbor, of the votes of black folks, Latinx folks, our Muslim American, Arab American population. And when you do these kind of actions against them, it's one thing for Rick Snyder to poison Flint, because we kind of get it. The GOP, they don't really like poor black people, but when you go in saying I'm gonna fix this, be a solution to this, and then you operate like the same modus operandi, you basically have the same calculus going on, just maybe with a softer face. It's not right. It is fundamentally wrong. And I really think that's what separates a quote unquote kind of corporate candidate or corporate politician from somebody who really is there for the people, whether you're a card-carrying socialist or progressive or whatnot. It really, even more so than some of the other stories we've talked about, the gas tax or her connections to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I think this really is instrumental in showing that it's this is the type of politician that we ended up electing. And I'm sorry, y'all shouldn't be surprised. I know a lot of the Abdul people back in the primary, it's they were saying that stuff, they were ringing the bells about it. But again, it looks like my best guess is she is going to shift on this, and Benton Harbor High School will remain. And maybe don't prove me wrong, please. But it's still disappointing that we had to. It's why does the community have to mobilize against somebody who said that they stood against these specific sorts of actions? It's very frustrating. So I did talk a little bit more about from the article here. So. So the plan calls for the Southwest Michigan School District to enter into an agreement with 8 nearby school districts. That's kind of what we're talking about, which would start in the 2020 to 21 school year. So again, extremely soon. This isn't even a multi-year plan. It's close up shop very much sooner rather than later. Talks a little bit about some of the issues they've been having. Enrollment has been declining in the district at a rate of between 5 to 10%, except for 2017 when it absorbed students from a closed charter school. The state cited the following statistics, which local leaders challenged in its decision to propose closing the high school. In 2018, only 3% of third grade students were reading at grade level, and 11th graders were deemed college ready each of the last 5 years. Treasury spokesman Ron Leaks, I'm not sure how to pronounce that last one, said the financial crisis that continues to plague the school district has existed for many years, long before the current administration and current version of the local school board were in place. With $18.3 million in debt, the district spends $700 per student to pay back debt each year. And I'm just going to go down and read a little bit from some of the folks who came out that night. Students and alumni are defending the high school on social media, including Benton Harbor Mayor Marcus Muhammad, who organized a protest rally against the plan for June 11th in Lansing. June 11th, I don't think we won't be on air again before that happens, but please look it up. June 11th, if you can be there, be there. I don't have the specific details in front of me, but if you want to help stand for Benton Harbor and their school district, again, that's June 11th. They'll be organizing that. Just Google it, DuckDuckGo it. As the mayor goes on to say, Muhammad, whose daughter graduated from the high school this spring and who has more than 2 children in the district, said he was especially shocked by the proposal from the governor, given that Whitmer campaigned on supporting public education when she came to Benton Harbor last year. There was nothing in her campaign that would allude to shutting down schools, turning public schools into charter districts, or dissolving districts, Muhammad said. To come up with this kind of radical change that is going to impact the community that has a high school for 140 years, that you're going to just dissolve this district, it's hard for me to believe this just got on your desk. They go on to say, State Board member Pamela Pugh came to Benton Harbor on Tuesday night to support the local board and their demands for a role in the plan. It's very difficult to get trust back once you've eroded that trust, she said, of Whitmer. I would hate for her to lose that trust that she has in Benton Harbor and all other communities of color that voted for her and to put her in office. If she's not coming with a blank sheet of paper, I would understand why this community would have issues meeting with her. So again, by the way, welcome onto the show, one of our other dear co-hosts, Lawrence.
Yeah, what up?
So, again, I was giving people an update. We talked about this at length on the show last week. I don't know if there's anything you specifically wanted to add, Lawrence. Again, it sounds like the people turning out had an effect. Again, over 400 people turned out Tuesday night, and now there's a meeting with Governor Whitmer that happened just shortly before we went on air. Again, people power. That's what can make these politicians move. But again, kind of as I said, Lawrence, I think it's disappointing that people had to organize around this in the first place. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, Doug, it goes back to what we talked about before, when you have special interests that looks at a location and says, hey, the land is more important than the people who are actually living on it. Mm-hmm. And since they have the financial means to persuade people to or persuade politicians to move policy that benefit them, it made sense that it was like, hey, yeah, this land that's not developed, that is the largest beachfront property in Southwest Michigan. Yeah, how about we let's landscape it. Let's colonize it, basically.
Colonize it.
Let's Let's develop it.
Yeah.
You know, without any regard of these 700 students that would be impacted, the families of those students, the small businesses that would be in that area. We've seen other forms of gentrification like this happen in Kalamazoo. Kalamazoo passed a non-gentrification bill because of certain actions like this. So to see it happen to one of the few all-black schools in Michigan, to a majority black school in Michigan, to a historic area that has had resources pulled from it, and not funds put into the city to develop the infrastructure, to put more money into the schools and those type of resources. It's was a self-fulfilling prophecy. We're going to snatch away everything as much as we can, and then we can say, hey, we're going to redevelop the land, and the rest of you people who are here, y'all just going to have to deal with the corporate takeover of the city. And it bothers my soul, because let's not forget, the person who represents Benton Harbor is Fred Upton. So, and also Gretchen Whitmore, because Gretchen Whitmore, the reason why she's in office, as they said, is because of counties like them. Counties like Benton Harbor and the surrounding areas and poor and disenfranchised people, because they wanted change. They wanted help. They didn't want to get screwed over.
Or at the very least, it was like, man, Bill Schuette is like retrograde AF, and he's gonna like
Bill Schuette from Midland, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, it's a hometown
hero, right? You see, his son went to the opposing high school as I did, and I think a couple grades above. So I definitely saw all the dynamics there. I went to elementary school with John Molinar, who represents our district there.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah. Oof. Well, I for our sake, I hope. Did he play any sports? Just
I'm not sure. He's a junior. His son. I'm not really sure.
I just got a picture in my head of like somebody just dunking a basketball in like Bill Schuette's son's face, but sorry.
That's horrible. Sorry. You don't even know if it was basketball. Like, it could have been wrestling. Like, he could have got body slammed.
I'm not sure if his son played any sports. He was definitely a couple grades above me. I think he's now into the political machine. Of course. I mean, that's.
I hope that if he was a part of mock trial, he got dunked on every single time,
vociferously.
Yes, for putting up non sequitur garbage arguments.
Facts don't care about your feelings. Anyway.
Oh my God, that's a story that we definitely need to talk about. Him, that nut job, and how he's been directly linked to mass killings. If you're not talking about,
you're talking about Mr.
Talking Points robot.
I definitely don't have a huge crush on AOC.
The Talking Points robot. What did the New York Times called him? The young person's intellectual, or the conservative intellectual?
I think so, something like that.
Like for those who do not know who this disgusting human being who I'm talking about is, we're talking about Ben Shapiro and him. Well, a couple weeks ago, he got completely and utterly wrecked by BBC.
That was one of my favorite things.
I saw that.
I mean, what's great, and a lot of people didn't know about that, is like that show he went on. That was a conservative show in the BBC. Like, if you're technically speaking, him and Ben Shapiro are part of the same like international movement or tendency or whatever. And it's really embarrassing. Ben, like, very mild question. It's like, we think compared to here, these new abortion policies are kind of draconian, and then Ben Shapiro goes ballistic, calls the guy like a socialist and a leftist, and after
I've never heard of you.
After Ben like gets off, he's like. So if that's the American conservative intellectual, they're in big trouble. It really underscores how, like, outside of our particular context, these quote unquote intellectuals like Ben Shapiro they are nothing. They got nothing. They are like an embarrassment. The only way they can get away with being considered an intellectual in this country is just how intellectually bankrupt our political discourse has really become,
and also our mainstream media. The normally when he goes on like American shows like Fox News or others. There's no follow-up questions. There's no clarification questions. They are basically asking him. They're lobbing up softballs for him to knock down. And what you also see from Ben Shapiro is the one way he likes to debate. He took, because the dude said the laws are taking these abortion laws are taking our rights back to the dark ages, and he said, oh, well, so what you're saying is that the conservative viewpoint is draconian and barbaric and taking us back to the dark ages. So what Ben Shapiro does, he reframes the question, he adds language that is inflammatory, that implies,
so he can debate against a straw man.
So he can debate against a straw man. That's his number one talking point. The one more way he likes to debate, if you've ever seen him debate. When he debated Cenk Uygur at Politicon. Yeah, it was Politicon 2017, I think. He did that throughout the entire debate. And that's his strategy. The reason why is because he's a vapid, empty vessel. He is a fast-talking Rush Limbaugh. When you look at the crux, the actual core of what he's saying. And it bothers me to my core that we do not have real journalism in America to basically do what other journalists in other countries do all the time, like that, which is, I'm going to ask you very simple questions of things that you said that are factual, and I'm going to have you, and I'm going to hold you account to what you said. That is it.
And that's a huge problem. Like all mainstream media is like, they do not hold their guests accountable to their own stuff, and that's not always the case. I think in particular, when I watch people on CNN interview, say, like Bernie Sanders or another progressive, they become real hard-hitting journalists then.
Yeah,
There's lots of follow-up questions and digging with.
Did you see, if you want to talk about, actually, did you see the Pete Buttigieg town hall and the Kamala Harris town hall?
I did not. The ones on Fox News?
No. Kamala Harris, I think, was on MSNBC, and I also think Buttigieg was on. No, Christian Gillibrand went on Fox News. Yeah, and she and that's a whole conversation that we also need to have. There's a couple stories I did want to talk about, but the debate, the debate on why or why not Democratic candidates should go on Fox News. And I think that's an interesting conversation that we should have, because I actually disagree with Elizabeth Warren. I thought that she should have went on.
Yeah, me too.
Like Warren could go on Fox News and do what Bernie did. Kamala Harris, I don't think can do that. I don't think Buttigieg can do that. But I think obviously Bernie and Tulsi can. They can go on Fox News, take the questions that they are going to be given, which are usually right-wing trash questions, and then destroy them on their own merits. And the viewers, which is half of the country, even if they disagree with them on social issues, will agree with them on economic issues and on issues of liberty. So, for example, when Bernie went on the show and he was talking about Medicare for all, and they tried to straw man the crowd saying, hey, everybody likes their private insurance. Who in here has insurance through their employer? Who in here would like a Medicare for all system? And the entire crowd went ballistic.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a rhetorical tool of the right wing in general. They've used this for decades. Is they equate progressivism or any kind of socialism with like, oh, that's the road to like a Stalinist, authoritarian, communist regime, and then, but by actually going on that platform, or you get room to actually describe what these policies actually are, whether you're like a New Deal progressive or like, I always tell people like, I'm a socialist. What does socialism means? It means that workers have democratic control over, where they live, where they work. You explain that to a working person who maybe gets a lot of this Fox News propaganda, and the wheels start turning. It's like, actually, that doesn't sound that bad.
My thing is to add to that. if there wasn't a Fox News, there would be something worse. And let's be clear, Fox News is, I think, either number 1 or number 2 when it comes to news shows in America, and they're constantly in the top 3 or top. They're constantly in the top 3 or top 5. So that's half the country. It is. If you think they're deplorables or not, which I do think a overwhelming majority of the representatives are deplorables. There is a percentage. I would say half of Republican voters you could put in deplorable category, but it's also that other half percent that you could talk to that will come on our side. The thing is, you have to make the argument to do so. And when you refuse to make that argument, or you refuse to engage with those people, you're letting them stew in their own echo chamber, where they are going to get more entrenched in their own sunken place. There's a reason why you see political commentators, especially Republican ones, that was always like, debate me, mostly because they're trying to chase clout, and they're trying to get famous. But at the other same time, you also see the Dave Rubins, the Ben Shapiros, the Ann Coulters, when they'll say this, but then when you have a Kyle Kalinske or Anna Kasparian or a Cenk Uygur who's like, all right, y'all want to debate? We can go all day, and then they cower and back out because they already know they don't want that work. They want to do a Steven Crowder where they can go to a college campus and talk to people who hasn't actually developed their political, who hasn't actually looked into these issues. They want to talk to people who are non-informed. They don't want to talk to someone who's informed. Steven Crowder's never going to debate Sam Cedar. Dave Rubin's never going to debate Sam Cedar. They're never going to do these things because they're vapid, empty vessels who love to deal with their talking points.
On the nose there. All right, well, you know what? It's about 6:35. Why don't we go ahead and go to break? When we come back, well, we got a lot to talk about. We always do. But keep it dialogued. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution.
This is George W. Bush, and you're listening to 89.1 WIDR, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Kalamazoo. You know what you're listening to, Kalamazoo, Michigan, man. What are you, stupid?
Depression can take many forms. It can feel like static in your brain, or as if everything around you has lost meaning. It can debilitate even the strongest of people. 89.1 WIDR is here to tell you that there is help and a way to improve mental health. WMU offers counseling for all students in the greater Kalamazoo community at Syndicuse Health Center. There is no need for an appointment for first-time visits. Open counseling times are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Syndicuse is located at 1903 West Michigan Avenue, Kalamazoo. For more information, please call 269-387-3287 or visit www.wmich.edu/health center.
hello, all y'all. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So let's shrink back down to Kalamazoo. We were just talking about Benton Harbor. We've got some international stories later in the program. Actually pretty depressing, so let's start with some good news. Yeah, we're going to talk about that article later. Apparently we got till 2050. So, you know, tick, 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 tock, everybody. Anyway, it's good news out of the City Commission. Kalamazoo voted to allow a needle exchange program with city approval. So I'll go ahead and read a little bit from the article, and then we'll talk a little bit about what this means. So the ordinance amendment reverses a ban on such programs, like needle exchange programs, that is, needle distribution, which offer clean needles and liquid that can be used to inject drugs. Under the amended language, prior approval must be sought before an organization begins operating under it. Northside Association for Community Development Executive Director Maddie Jordan Woods said she fears a needle distribution program could impact some parts of town harder than others. Well, so, okay, this is her. She's kind of offering an argument against it. And I'll go ahead and read it. They said, I don't personally agree, but she said they get to stay in their nice neighborhoods, talk about putting things in our communities, and there is no oversight what happens in the communities, she said. She said, I would like to imagine the north side that kids don't have to worry about getting stuck with a needle in the park. And that's real. That is a very real thing. Nancy King said needle exchange programs can help keep people alive. Addiction is a complicated illness, she said, and the needle exchange program would be a tool to be proactive rather than reactive. It's a good first step the city should take, she told the commission, and it could save lives by reducing harm and keeping people alive longer. And if you don't know too much about Nancy King, she is part of the COPE network. They do a lot of Narcan trainings and kind of community education about drug overdoses. So I think, like, I don't want to dismiss those criticisms. I would say, bottom line, this is a program that saves lives. And, I'm not just saying that as like, I think it will. This is based on similar programs that are practiced all across the country, all around the world, and the data backs it up. Studies have shown time and time again that when you offer these kinds of programs, needle exchange, it reduces healthcare costs, it prevents people from contracting communicable diseases, and especially, and I really want to make this point here, when it is done in concert with other programs that treat drug addiction like an illness rather than a crime that needs to be punished, communities have seen tremendously better outcomes and actually reduced rates of addiction over time. So, Lawrence, I don't know, did you want to speak to that at all?
I mean, there's been the study that backs up what you're saying is that there was a study that was done in Canada. Canada had a needle exchange program, and because Canada has a universal healthcare program, the people who were in the program didn't have to pay for the treatment. It was free to the point of service. So people who were using, or people who were wanted to get clean, it was a way that it kept the people who were addicted. It lowered their chances of actually dying, but it also helped those who were trying to get off. It helped them to do so better. So it is a good first step that's backed by data. Also, I think Denmark and some other places also does a program similar to this. I would say I'm happy that we're making comprehensive change, and I want to see us go further, because as of right now, the people who are going to be in those programs are probably going to have to pay for it out of pocket, and a lot of them are probably lower income people who are in situations where they're not going to have the money or resources to do so. But I don't know, because we haven't seen it actually be implemented yet. But I am happy that we are making productive, smart steps.
At the Attorney General
Yep.
And I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I agree, and I wanted to. Sorry. A good on the city commission. Again, I think we need to keep going. Really, especially follow the recommendations of people like Nancy and the COPE Network, and keep developing programs that can holistically help those with these chronic addictions and problems, and also make sure we listen to the community. It is true. Open drug use, the kind that takes place in parks and all that, does happen more often in lower income neighborhoods than it does in, say, like, Westnedge Hills or Winchell, etc. There needs to be also make sure that we do the proper community follow-up and make sure that we're also doing other programs in tandem that can kind of assuage those particular fears and concerns. So, got a couple of good stories from the statewide level. We didn't have too much specifically about Kalamazoo this week. It was kind of a bit of a slow week, honestly. But we did... there's some couple good news about we did one where we threw some shade at Whitmer. We got to give her some props right now. She just vouched for some legislation to help protect our LGBTQ brothers, sisters, and non-binary folks out there, which again comes right now during Pride Month. So just a little bit. Read a little bit from it. So, Whitmer and Michigan lawmakers on Tuesday announced legislation to amend Michigan's civil rights law to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Lawmakers and supporters say they are hopeful because for the first time they have co-sponsors from each party and a governor who strongly supports the change. They also cited growing support in the business community, as leaders increasingly see a diverse workforce as crucial to growth and success. Oh man, that last sentence, like, around this time of year, a lot of my radical queer friends, we have a lot of conversations about rainbow capitalism. There's that joke. I think one of my favorite is like there's this meme going around where it's like, Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob. And like the top panel is like Goldman Sachs with like a rainbow flag, and somebody's interviewing Mr. Krabs. They're like, "Oh, so why did you decide to support the LGBTQ community during Pride Month?" And then at the bottom panel, he's like, "Money."
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's real. Yeah.
Real is good.
Oh man. Okay, this is just interesting. Like, there's actually another sentence of this. There's 3 more sentences in this article that talk about, like, Fortune 500 companies, CEO of the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. Okay, so yeah. Again, I think that for the cynical person, I think that does show that it's like, the needle on these issues moves, really. Because of market pressures and market, like, I think a good example, like when
LGBT community, welcome to America. That's how America works all the time. Mm-hmm. Do you honestly believe Nike would have supported Kaepernick?
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up.
Right,
yeah.
It's not, but it wasn't just that. Yeah. Back during the civil rights era, Coca-Cola and a bunch of those other companies also rocked with the civil rights movement. Why? Because they realized that the country is made up of diverse people who buy multiple products. It's also the same reason why the store in Colorado that stopped selling Nikes because he was protesting Kaepernick shut down. Mm-hmm. They shut down because people did not want to go to their store because their store wasn't selling the product that people wanted. Mm-hmm. But he was protesting the NFL and protesting Kaepernick because he had freedom. Well, free market capitalism said you can go screw yourself with an organically grown cucumber. So I mean, when you and your friends are saying, or some of you and your LGBTQ friends talk about rainbow capitalism, that's America whole hog. Because America only cares when it affects the bottom dollar.
Yep. No. Exactly. I'm sorry.
As I buy my Be True limited edition Nike sneakers, literally for $200. It's like, it is what it is, and I think
I'm not knocking.
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, because you have to be mindful. I know people that are on social media heavy. You can see all these brands will have their rainbow avatars now, as Pride Month is here, and. Okay, it's good, but we would hope. Obviously, you mentioned it's cynical a little bit, but you would hope those people making those decisions have the intentions at heart. I would guarantee some of them do not. I would guarantee some of them do. So.
Well, I mean, the reason why it's a double-edged sword because it also depends on who are they supporting. Yeah. Like Nike supported Kaepernick, and Kaepernick put his money into programs that was helping the black community. You know what I'm saying? So they knew that the money that they were going to give him, which is literally a rounding error for them, was going to go to fighting for criminal justice. So if they thought that they were going to make a nickel less, they would not have done it. But they also knew that they also saw the trend of the country being more progressive. It is bad economics to not side on the side of right. But to quote Michael Brooks, capitalism, leans fascist because that's usually what keeps the status quo what it is. The problem is it only works when a majority of the people also agree, and our country, an overwhelming majority of people do not.
I feel like you could hear like the boardroom at New Balance like audibly groan when all the right wing people was like, well, we're just gonna wear New Balance from now on, and it's just the whole board's like, please don't, please. No.
I mean, you already got tiki. You already had tiki torches and khakis come out and be like, look, we don't support Charlottesville.
That's crazy.
We don't support none of y'all. We are not.
It's like, when your core market is literally going to die of old age in 20 years, that's not good. That's no. Yeah.
But no, the thing that I was gonna say is that it is Pride Month, and there's a couple stories that I wanted to talk about, especially from Dallas. Talking about the story that happened in Dallas, the police officers found another black transgender woman. It's the third transgender woman that died in Dallas. It's the 8th transgender woman in America this year that was killed. I do not remember her name.
I believe. Hold on, just a sec. I can look this up real quick. But keep going.
So Shinell Lindsay.
Yes, Shinell Lindsay. See, here's the thing. The thing is that we have to remember that, like, for myself as a black man in America, I have to remember that even though I feel under siege a good portion of the time when it comes to our laws, there's a couple of stories that I definitely want to talk about, especially with Mayor Pete and some of his scandals that's been coming out. Booty Judge, Booty Edge,
Booty Juice.
I don't call him that. I call him Booty Judge because that's what his name sounds like when I heard it. The thing is that we have to also remember that if we talk about social equality, so that means, or social justice or social equality, that means the same rules and same laws and same protections that I want for myself, I want for everybody else. And the fact that this is the 3rd transgender black woman that has died in Dallas, I'm gonna need for Dallas police and that community check themselves, because we need to be, because someone just living their lives the way that they believe, that because of them trying to them existing in the way that they're comfortable with, does not give you a right to harm them. And it reminds me a lot of the the race riots that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where black businesses and black owners would would have shops right next to white owners, and then those white mobs would go around killing them, killing black folks in the middle of the night. Ida B. Wells writing about lynchings that she would see in her journalism. It's very similar things are still happening today, and that story was reminding me of that people who are just trying to live their lives are still being victimized just because they exist.
Oh yeah, and there's a huge intersection between like homophobia, transphobia, and white supremacy. At the same time that we were talking about, what happened with Ms. Lindsay. We also had right around the same time, like concurrently, Joanna Medina Leon was died in ICE custody. She's a transgender woman seeking asylum from El Salvador.
Yeah.
And essentially, what happened is, she had HIV, and these people inside of ICE did not give her adequate treatment. And this has also led to the deaths of several children, various other people in ICE custody. And it ties back to, I can't remember the specific article or air date, but I was listening to Democracy Now! A couple of weeks ago, and they talked about how there's been a lot of reports that ICE officers and Border Patrol officers have been very overt in harassing people who are LGBT and have given them extra or quote unquote special bad treatment compared to some of the other inmates. And this really, I think this really ties into that in a really unfortunate, very sad way. There are a lot of reactionaries who work in those particular agencies who, honestly, you want to look and see like why this woman didn't get the proper medical treatment that she deserved. I very much doubt it was incompetence. I think there was some active hate that played a role in that.
I mean, it's very similar to Sandra Bland, man. Like, It's very similar to other stories where we hear about people dying in custody of people whose sole job is to make sure that they are alive so they can stand their day in court. And if they don't feel like your life is worth protecting, then they could neglect you, and you will die in a cell. I mean, it's not surprising. We've talked about on this show multiple stories about ICE basically running slave labor camps, that these private prisons are I don't like using private prisons or using
they're following the market, because mass incarceration has become such a big issue that they're actually shifting a lot of their resources towards these border camps and these border facilities for that labor, because it's getting increasingly difficult to nakedly re-enslave a lot of black Americans.
This is no different. The things that we're doing to the migrants on the border is no different than what we did to the Japanese during World War II. It's they're internment camps. Yeah. These are not
as George Takei actually said, it's like, well, at least when I was in the internment camp, they didn't separate me from my mother. So
God. Yeah, in Laura Ingraham, these are not summer camps. Okay, you disgusting human being, you. They're internment camps, man, and we talked about multiple stories about how there were ICE agents that were accused of sexual misconduct with some of the underage minors, of how they were basically forcing these people into slave labor. And no one's addressing the fact that ICE's job is already being done by Border Patrol, and that ICE was created because of 9/11. That this organization is a hammer, and they look at every situation like it's a nail. They do not need to exist as they are doing more harm than good.
And just a quick aside, if you spend time online so one of the big issues that alt-right people spend a lot of their time and energy on, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's just this kind of odd, very specific cultural thing where they devote a lot of online energy towards looking at child trafficking, sex trafficking, and that kind of abuse. And the thing is, a lot of times, they share these stories that should be shared, and there's this very explicit focus on it. But and sometimes it's malarkey, like the whole Pizzagate thing. But when it comes to documented stories of our border patrol engaging in this activity that they otherwise and rightfully hyperventilate about, it crickets, like nothing.
I mean, dog. What? In both of these stories, in both of the stories, in the black transgender woman that got killed, and in this story, where are the pro-life people? Where's my pro-life people who loves to claim that a baby is a baby at the moment of conception?
Well, there have been stories about women having unnecessary miscarriages under ICE custody, and you don't hear the pro-lifers talk about that.
Where is the pro-life people asking where is the humanity and how these people are being treated? Where is the pro-life people when it comes to these murders of black people, LGBT people, others, and asking how can we fix it as a society? You don't hear that. You just hear crickets. You hear condemnation and virtue signaling. Virtue signaling from the right. Yeah. That's what it is. So, yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we wrap up this topic and go to break?
Nah.
All right. So I think with that, let's go ahead and go to break. When we come back, again, we've got a lot to talk about. Not exactly sure which thing we're going to hit on first, but please stay tuned. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, your only source for political revolution.
Are you the police?
No, ma'am.
We're DJs. 89.1 FM, Wider Syndicate.
They're not gonna catch us. We're on a mission from God.
Is your RSO looking for new ways to get its name out to Western's campus and the greater Kalamazoo community? Why not use the wider airwaves? For more information on how we can work together to promote your organization and events, go to widrfm.org and click on the Airtime and Sponsorship page under the Support tab.
All right, y'all. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So we're going to go in, talk a little bit about some national politics. Real quick, so I don't know the explicit details of this. While we were talking about state politics, Rick Snyder's phone got by investigators. So I don't want to talk about that story too much because honestly, I want to see where it goes. But for those who are hoping for maybe a modicum of justice against the people who poisoned Flint, there is some light on the tunnel. Of course, there's still no clean water in Flint, but sorry, just yell about that for the next 60 minutes. So just keep that in mind. But we're gonna pivot, talk about some national politics again. Talk about the endless primary that we've got going on. So the California State Convention just popped up, and I know, Lawrence, you wanted to maybe dive in and talk about that. Well, did you want to talk about it, or like we did some Mayor Pete stuff?
We can talk about a couple different things.
Yeah.
First, let's talk about the fact that this California convention had a overwhelming number of presidential candidates at it, but the person who's been leading in a majority of the polls did not show up.
Oh, really? You don't say.
So, I mean, you had everybody there. John Hickenlooper, who got booed for a minute straight. You had...
Yeah, it's like, he's like, socialism's not the answer. And then he got booed for, like, a minute straight. That warmed my little socialist heart so much.
Like, he got booed. He got booed for a minute straight. Who else got booed for a minute straight? John Hickenlooper got booed for a minute straight because he was trying to trash left-wing policies.
Let's not leave the corporate insurance CEOs behind, guys.
Yeah, I mean, oh my God, it was vicious, man. Like, you don't go into one of the bluest states. I would say the second or first, number one or number two most blue state in the country, and you think that you can just spit garbage to the crowd. And the crowd's not gonna react. Mm-hmm. Like all of those moments, like, and I think that's the reason why, for those who did not catch the reference, why Joe Biden wasn't there. He didn't want to have one of those moments. He didn't, because in national polls recently, he's been tanking, especially in battleground states like Iowa and New Hampshire and a couple others. His massive lead, quote unquote, has been deteriorating. Why? Because Biden has the same problem as Hillary. Yeah. The more he talks, the more people see that he's a garbage. That he's not a garbage human being. He has garbage policies and ideas.
It's like kind of like her issue, but I think exacerbated by the fact that, like, again, it's about holding on to where he is in the polls. He doesn't go up, just always down. But also, like, his flaws are just much more difficult to ignore than Hillary. Hillary, to her credit, was a much more agile politician, and there were certain issues, people's issues that you could tell she at least cared about on some level. Joe just, like, he has no political agility. I mean, we've seen this. Like, he's ran for president twice before and lost miserably. That there was reason for that.
No, I mean, he's a good debater. He can make a decent argument if you watch the old debates. Like I spent one time watching one of the old debates. He can make a decent argument, and I actually have to say, like, when he debated Paul Ryan, I would say Paul Ryan because Sarah Palin wasn't. That's a very low bar. But, his debate with Paul Ryan I thought was really good. Here's the problem. He's going to be on stage with, like, Tulsi and Warren and Bernie.
And knock on wood, Mike Gravel. It probably won't happen, but I'd love to see it.
Oh, my God. No, he was on stage with Mike Gravel before. I think it was in 2004.
There is footage of that.
And Mike Gravel was just giving him haymakers.
Yeah.
I was like,
where do you keep voting for war criminals, Joe?
Oh, my God. It was like watching one of those new Mortal Kombat fatalities. I was sitting there like, oh, God. Yeah. Oh, my kidneys. It was amazing to see Bernie take some. It wasn't. They were indirect shots, but it was Bernie basically was planting his flag, saying there's no middle ground for Medicare for all. There's no middle ground for a Green New Deal. There's no middle ground for universal college, minimum wage, criminal justice, and all these things. And basically saying there is a progressive way of looking at this problem, and there's the way that got us Trump. And it's amazing to me to see how many people, especially liberals, are like, I want to go back to before Trump, and they are not realizing, you want to go back to an idea and policy that has been so detrimental to the workers and people of the United States that it created Trump. Like what? What is your dysfunction?
Well, and it's so. What's difficult about it is, most average Americans already realize this. It's just the people who control the media are these centrist. Just a bunch of centrist foolishness. You have to explain that, people they are not for these policies. Average person pays more attention to policy than you give the general public credit for. And a Joe Biden could potentially win a primary of enthusiastic Democratic primary voters. But keep in mind, even in 2016, which was one of the most intense primaries in recent memory, I think it was something like only between 10 or less than 10% of the American public actually engaged in the political primaries. So it's only the most diehard people who participate in political primaries. When you try to bring that candidate forward to the general population, think about it. These places like Pennsylvania, here in the state of Michigan, you're going to have Joe Biden. It's the average workers were like, you're the reason I don't have a job anymore.
Y'all might mess around and be the reason why I don't have a house. Y'all bailed out Wall Street, but y'all didn't bail us out.
This is why I'm thousands of dollars in credit card debt.
It's amazing to me to see the BS from last time reoccur again, and it's amazing. We talked about it early on in the show before about how Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the lady from Center of American Progress, Pete Buttigieg, and others were at dinners in New York colluding to see how they can stop Bernie's campaign. Because if you believe the polling, Bernie's always been number 2. It was always Biden, then Bernie. If you believe the polling, a lot of the polling was skewed because they were not polling people who are under the age of 50 and people who did not make $100,000 less. So those things need to be also taken into account. But the overwhelming majority of polls, if you look down, Biden was winning. Biden has historically always faltered after Super Tuesday. After Super Tuesday, Biden has always trickled away. And I don't think anything's going to change now, especially since we live in the age of YouTube and everything that he has said and done has been recorded and put on YouTube. So that millennials, the oldest millennial that will be voting this year is 38. The youngest millennial will be, I think, 20, I think it's 20, 21.
Mm-hmm. Right. I can't imagine how even the core of the party is going to stand for his retrograde positions on so many things. I think it just came out today, and I know the whole last show we were dunking on Joe Biden, but this guy is quote unquote the front runner, even though it just came out. He stands by his decision that he does not want to repeal the Hyde Amendment, which is some baseline for at least all the other Democratic candidates running for president.
His campaign contradicted him. He told the ACLU 2 weeks ago that and then his campaign wants to say no, he still supports it, which is just what the heck? Makes no sense. And it's in the heightened age of social media, as as we talk about, it's how many people are just not consuming this information every day to just they don't hear about it because all they're watching is Don Lemon after they come home from work.
Again, if we're talking about what makes him a worse candidate than say even Clinton is
he's
Clinton,
worse.
We criticize a lot of obliviousness about where the zeitgeist was, and I think Clinton, at least she started to understand it by the end of the campaign, and in retrospect, when she wasn't talking about Russia, she talked about how it's it was a moment of really anti-establishment revolt. I wish I'd gone back and thought about that. Joe's never gone back and thought twice about any of his decisions, and this is a guy who abortion rights are being attacked more severely than they have in a generation. We've got a time when global fascism is on the rise, and he's talking about these build bridges, there's good Republicans and all these platitudes that are just not in sync at all with what even kind of people in the center of the Democratic Party believe these days.
I mean, dog, earlier this year, before he even started running his campaign, he said that he agreed with Paul Ryan and that we should cut Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. Mm-hmm. Are you kidding me?
And the thing that I see happening with Biden is if he is, if he were to win the primary, it's going to be a general election being debated on. Biden will have the Trump's morality to play, and I'm just imagining all of the GOP funded ads that are going to show all of his little weird. Creeping in on children and women. Oh, just imagine a compilation of that being on. That's exactly what they're going to run as the campaign ads. That's exactly what they're going to run as the campaign ads. And
what they're going to run is the same thing Hillary tried to do in 2016, which was the Hollywood access tape.
Yep.
And the other, and that Trump cusses and he's immoral and he says bad things. And the problem is that Trump is, for all intents and purposes, the average Republican. He is an establishment Republican who does not threaten the status quo. He's so much of an establishment Republican. When you look at the things that he's done, mm-hmm. what has he done? He has deregulated mostly everything that you could possibly deregulate in our country. So water, air, our environment. He's made it easier for people who are mentally ill and others to have weapons. He let the Violence Against Women's Act expire under him. He has threatened multiple countries of war that our country's been dying, that neocons have been wanting to go to war with. And the first major thing that he's ever did was tax cuts. The tax cuts wasn't even as big as the Bush tax cuts, but they were just as horrendous. So he is an establishment Republican through and through. His racism and misogyny is just mask off. And that's the reason why people like John McCain and others who disliked him as a human being still voted for him. This is the reason why Lindsey Graham would say that he's a disgusting human being during the primary, but still praise him and coddle him now.
Yeah, right. On the nose.
And this is the problem. Running a he's immoral for America type of campaign didn't work the last time. You know what does work? He's not a billionaire. He's not a billionaire. He's not an economic genius. He's broke and he doesn't know how to run this country. He's running this country. He's running his country the same way he ran his bankrupting companies.
Yeah.
That's how you attack Trump. Mm-hmm. You attack Trump by taking his strength of being a strong man, and you're like, he's a strong man who, one, can't say coherent sentences. Two, he says that he's helped our economy, but wages have been stagnating since the 1930s, and people are actually losing money now. Like when you account for inflation, more Americans have lost money, and when you count for his tax cuts, more people are spending more money to the rich and giving them more benefits than what the average American is getting. You take the strength or the argument of him helping Americans, and you say, no, you have not made America great again. You've made yourself and your rich donors great again. So that's how that's what Warren, Tulsi, Bernie, and the progressives will do, because because they're smart enough to do so. I even think Kamala Harris would also make that argument.
I think it boils down to, it's like, you can't call out the emperor on having no clothes if you're standing out there buck-ass naked your damn self.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing. And that's also when we want to talk about Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi not calling for impeachment. And there's a debate that's going on the left about that.
I want to make. Did you? I'm sorry. You have someone you wanted to interject with?
Yeah,
real quick? Yes.
I'd mentioned. I'd mentioned when you took off there. Just imagine a primary. Where Joe Biden, wins, and then he's in the general election with Trump, and he's going to keep using the Hillary. Trump's immoral. Trump's a bad guy. Go back to the Hollywood Access tape, and what the GOP is going to do is they're going to run ad after ad, compilation videos of Joe Biden being weird and creepy to kids.
Yes,
It's not going to work. Okay, it's just not going to work. Yeah, that's all they have to run. Just imagine that. It
wouldn't just be that, dog.
I know it would not be.
It would also be his video of him arguing for the '94 crime bill.
Yeah.
It would also be him arguing for the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
It would also be.
If you want to get depressed tonight, imagine a 2020 debate stage where Donald and Joe are debating about which one of them is the least creepy old man.
Oh no! It's Joe by far because Joe has not. It's Joe by far. But here's the thing is, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that argument.
No.
Here's the problem. In a debate, Joe would smash Trump. Yeah. That's the problem. Here's also the other problem. No one wants to vote for Joe except people who are over the age of 50 and who makes more than $100,000, $100K a year. That's it. If you are the average American, you ain't messing with Joe.
Yeah.
Like the thing that irritates me the most when it comes to this presidential cycle is that we talked about, the establishment Democrats, Nancy Pelosi and others, are trying to railroad progressives. The DCCC saying that that they won't work with vendors or others who are helping primary people who are primarying incumbents, even though they want to primary Ilhan Omar, which is a whole nother thing.
Good luck with that. She is very popular in her district. Just so y'all know.
No, here's the thing. They want to primary her from the right of center. They want to primary her with a Democrat who's from the right of center. And I'm sitting here like, you didn't learn anything between 2018, did you? Y'all didn't learn. Y'all didn't learn nothing from 2016. Y'all didn't learn from 2000. Yeah, maybe. Look, I don't want to say you're slow, but this job about politics is about making an argument and standing by what you do. You cannot make that argument when you are a hypocrite and you have a record of being a hypocrite, and then you are going to ask people to trust you. It bothers me because I'm like, we see people who can actually, like, anybody who's on the Democrat side for the most part who's running for 2020, I would vote for over Trump. But here's the problem: there are people who are better at, who has a legacy of being dope and being better, and then there are people who are garbage. Yeah. Bernie and Warren and Tulsi have a legacy of being progressives. Yeah. There are other people who are just garbage.
Yeah. I think this brings us back to this whole idea of it's like, you debate with people online and they'll be like, so would you just not vote? You got to vote blue no matter who. Blue, if you're thinking of even not doing that, you're an awful person. You're why it's going to lose. Statistically, no. Here's the problem. It's not about whether I like Joe Biden or not, whether I would vote for him or the Socialist Party candidate or whatever. It's about the millions, thousands of people in Michigan who, if Joe Biden's the nominee, are going to stay their ass at home. Yeah. That's what it's about. That is what it's about. If you cannot excite people enough to vote, to engage, then any other discussion is really totally asinine. And I would also say, and this kind of segues into the next topic we're going to talk about. Really, if whoever gets the nomination isn't at least talking about a Green New Deal, then it is pretty damn pointless, to be honest. Because if you ain't gonna get somebody in there who's gonna be fierce and sincere about a climate transition, then yeah, it's really like Joe would just be, and this isn't me talking. This is Greenpeace. This is people like Bill McKibben and 350.org. They have described his potential presidency as a death sentence because it would be slightly less bad than Trump, but climate change, it's a very zero-sum problem. You either do enough in the next 10 years to prevent the apocalypse, or you don't.
I mean, Doc, we also talk about blue no matter who. We just had a Louisiana governor pass in a draconian abortion bill.
Yeah.
And the Louisiana governor is a Democrat.
Yeah.
So let's not play. Like there are some people who are here to play. Beto is here to play. Beto needs to go. Okay,
I was born to be in it, man.
Yeah. Beto would be better as a part of as a rep or trying to take a Ted Cruz seat again.
Yeah.
He's better than Ted Cruz, but he's not.
No, man. I'll say do what you normally do in a midlife crisis, man. Reunite your punk rock band. Don't run for president. All right? There's enough people running for president.
Dog, go to the movies, man. John Wick is awesome. Like, like Godzilla's awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like, Shaft is about to come out on the 14th. Like, you know what I'm saying? There are a bunch of good movies. Endgame is still in theaters. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Lion King on the way.
Right, Lion King on the way. John Hickenlooper. Right, Aladdin's actually dope. So John Hickenlooper, Christian Gillibrand, Amy Cloudbootjar. Yeah. There's a bunch of y'all there's a bunch of, and the people who are running, there's 24 candidates. Mm-hmm. About 20. No.
There's about 200 candidates. Anyway, you say.
I'm just saying, a bunch of y'all got there's some other things y'all can go do, okay? You know what I'm saying? It's summer's here. You know what I'm saying? Go on vacation. You know what I'm saying?
I think it was Amy. I can't remember if it was Christian Gillibrand or Amy Klobuchar. One of them put out a thing. It's like, we're struggling to get to 63,000 unique donors, and of course they just bumped up the threshold. Now you need 130,000 donors. So, I am wondering, because the debates start next month, don't they?
Yes, July 30th and 31st.
So, a lot of
it's in
you...
Detroit. I'm trying to make it out there.
A lot of those obscure candidates, y'all, you ain't got much time left. I'm sorry.
I know. The reason, I bet the reason why they did that is because they're trying to keep Tulsi off of the debate stage, because Tulsi's been on Fox News railing against our invasion, are helping the coup that we're doing in Venezuela. Yeah. She's been fighting against
vocally trying to prevent another disaster with Iran.
Speaking out against what we're doing in Yemen. Like, when it comes to foreign policy, like the three progressives that I keep mentioning, it warms my heart. It will warm my heart if in the final five or in the top five, it's Warren. It's Bernie, Warren, Tulsi. I'm gonna put Kamala Harris in there because I think she has enough. She's a smart enough candidate to fake it, to fake progressivism enough to get there.
Yeah. Then Joe, so that the otde four can just dogpile him until he drops out.
No. It's either gonna be Joe. It's gonna be Mayor Pete. No, this is my final. This is the one that's going to be in the final. It's either Joe, Mayor Pete, Andrew Yang, or Beto might come back. It's one of those. The reason why is because the mainstream media loves them. And they love Mayor Pete because Mayor Pete's an empty vessel. He doesn't have specific policies. He doesn't actually stand for much. He went on Vox and said we should not be talking about policies. We need to talk about our ideas and philosophies. While Elizabeth Warren is pushing out policy after policy.
I mean, when you have when you had Trump that kind of, I guess, pioneered the exotic, just ridiculous policy ideas that end up actually coming true. Yeah. I have no quarrel with an Andrew Yang literally just saying, hey, give everyone those, or Elizabeth Warren saying, hey, give the student, the student debt reform. Like, the crazier the policy, the better. I think the floodgates have been opened now.
No, the fact is that UBI has been practiced in multiple countries, and studies have shown that it works. And studies have also shown when you raise the minimum wage, you lower the rate of suicides. Studies have shown that, we have as much college student loan debt as the housing crisis was, and if we were to take the burden off the backs of those people, then they could put their money into the economy that would stimulate the economy, or make small businesses, which will also stimulate the economy. So these ideas have net benefit. These policies have net benefits to them. In comparison to say, no, we should not talk about that. We should just put our hopes and values on the table.
Yeah.
When has that worked? When?
And I think people like Yang and all them kind of gain traction on stuff like UBI because it's kind of like old man Marx once wrote, the capitalists will eventually cause their own undoing, and by that he means if you by their own, the way that the capitalist system works, they want to squeeze as much profit as possible and pay their workers as less as they can. But at the same time, if your workers aren't making money, your workers are also your consumers. If they do not have the financial resources to consume, then you are no longer making profit, and it becomes this snake that eats its own tail. So I think again, to be a little cynical, the shift of some people in the center towards some of these policies, it also is kind of a realization that, things can't keep going the way that they are, or else we're not even going to be able to sustain the neoliberal system that we currently have.
I don't like the way Andrew Yang is trying to do UBI on
his terms of taking away from social, the social benefit
that's
that you already have.
Because I'm glad that you said that. The reason why I have that problem is because it's the same plan Nixon wanted to do, but if you look at, let's say, Finland just did UBI. They just ended their grand experiment, but again, Finland has universal health care. They have universal free college and tuition. They already have a strong safety net to begin with, and then they added UBI on top of it. And they showed that not only it's one of the main reasons why Finland is always one of the happiest countries every single year, but it took a lot of burden from those who are struggling. It took a lot of that burden off their backs, so they didn't have to go to jobs or be at jobs that they didn't like. It gave people more leeway to live. So I mean, it is if we had a system that was like more like Finland or even Kenya does universal UBI. Those are good positive ways to look at UBI and apply it to America.
What do you think of and this is going to the weeds a little bit, but what do you think of his and I'm talking in reference to Andrew Yang here, his kind of grip with the alt-right and white supremacists? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. White supremacists, the fact that you have certain white supremacists that like Andrew Yang make me laugh because they don't agree with any of the other things that he talks about. And I'm not even a big fan of Andrew Yang. He doesn't support universal free college and tuition. So, but the fact that he's brought UBI out as a main issue, and the fact that we even are having a discussion about it, that's the reason why I like Andrew Yang. Is that there are times where he's very much more libertarian than progressive,
and I think that's where he gets a lot of that right-wing support.
And that's why, but at the same time, there's going to be people who I agree with that I think are absolutely horrendous. Like, I agree with Ron Paul on the fact that we should not be giving Saudi Arabia weapons to bomb Yemen. But Ron Paul believes that universal health care is slavery. He compared he compared Medicare for all and universal health care as slavery, even though he went to Canada to get his hip surgery done. To get his hernia surgery.
Or his son who compared a basic universal health care system that every other Western country has to like the enslavement of doctors. You know?
No, that was him.
Yeah,
that was him. And then years later, after he got his ass whooped by his neighbor, he flew to Canada to get a hernia surgery.
No, that was Rand. Were you talking about Rand or Ron? I mean, Ron's the dad, Rand's the... Okay,
no, I'm talking about Rand. I'm talking about the son.
Right.
I'm talking about the son who's compared universal health care to slavery. Yeah. So I'm like, no. Okay, he wants to legalize marijuana. I agree with him that we should legalize marijuana. But when it comes to health care or a woman's right to choose, he's dead wrong and he's a garbage person for it. Yeah. There's alt-right people who likes Tulsi. I think, and there was news about that, but at the same time, they don't like Tulsi because of her policies. They like Tulsi because Tulsi's fine.
And she's got the right line on foreign policy. Let's be clear.
She's got really nice videos. As somebody that worked in video, have you met her videos are really HD, they're really high quality, super nice. You would think that it's some movie trailer almost or some television show.
Tulsi's videos, Tulsi video, her announcement video, and the one that she talked about, her video about railing against the regime change wars that America does. Mm-hmm. Those videos were dope. Mm-hmm. In comparison to Biden, in comparison to Biden, whose campaign video was the Nazi rally in Charlottesville was bad.
It was bad. And what are we gonna do about it?
Right. You're watching the video, you're like, and are you gonna do something about it?
That's what makes me so mad about how out of he uses Charlottesville as a political prop. And why can I say this is he's directly quoted as saying later on, it's I don't think things are really that bad right now. Things were much worse in the 60s. And by the way, you could have a good debate about which decade was more chaotic, but to say everything's okay while invoking Charlottesville in your opening video, clearly thing are not okay.
Okay. Here's the thing: are black people still getting lynched at an exuberant rate? Is that happening back since the 60s? Okay, no. Can black people vote, and are they and other people vote in housing discrimination and all those things are now legally bound to our Constitution that you can't do that to people. Yes, those are things that happened in the 60s. That was better. Here's the problem: the fact that Biden, in I think it was 1972 or something, years along those lines, when he was a freshman in the Senate, or he was a freshman representative, he was for busing desegregation. Yep. He eulogized Strom Thurmond, who was a segregationist. No. No. You cannot in the same breath say that you are the best choice for the Democrats when you have a legacy of being on the wrong side of policies for decades.
Yeah. So I want to take a quick break, and then I want to transition to perhaps the most dire policy he's on the wrong side of. Well, we want to talk about that recent report about climate change. But any other thoughts about the primary and the issues surrounding it before we go to break?
The stories that came out about Pete Buttigieg, about his disparities, him being a mayor, and the racist things that happen under him being a mayor of South Bend. It's amazing to me to see how the mainstream media has not talked about it. Because if those things happened to Bernie Sanders, and after we've seen the smears in Politicon and New York Times and Washington Post on Bernie Sanders about how he's a cheap Jew that's spending all his money on houses and
political article.
Yeah. So you saw that, but the fact that you saw there was a story that came out about the black police officer that didn't get backed up by the police chief, a police chief that Buttigieg put in place, that all the accounts and all the stories and the witnesses that talked about it said that no, the police officer, the police chief that Buttigieg put in place did not back up a black police officer when the black police officer needed help. And then Mayor Pete lied about it. He covered it up, and he's caught lying about it. And then he hid the information and hid the story so that people wouldn't talk about it. That shows, and that's one of many stories from that's coming out of South Bend about how he, when it comes to dealing with black people and dealing with people of color, that he helped cover up police officers that were saying racist thing about the former black police chief. He fired people who wanted to investigate about it. He fired people who were trying to talk about it.
Sounds a little Rami.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot like the situation in Chicago.
Yeah. So you have that going on, but the mainstream media doesn't talk about it.
And again, in that case, I mean, it's a liberal city center of a conservative state too. With you have Governor Rauner in Illinois, and then Rahm appears to be some savior-ish. While really it's status quo.
Man, dog, the Laquan McDonald story is still a story that pisses me off every day when I think of Rahm Emanuel. I mean, there's a number of stories that we could talk about with Rahm Emanuel that he needs to go take a long walk off. He's
taking a long bike ride. Did you see that?
He needs to take a long bike ride off a short
Lake
bridge.
Michigan.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but
off of the Navy Pier.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is that it's amazing to see what the mainstream media will focus on and what they are choosing to focus on, because it's more about what they choose to focus on and how they talk about it than the subjects that they're actually talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And again, this next story we're going to talk about, this really should be all the media is talking about, but you really only see it just kind of like a few minutes maybe on mainstream media. A lot of independent media has been talking about this to extensive length, but again, we're going to go to break, and then I think we're going to wrap up. We've got 2 stories about climate change that, by the way, I hate to end the show on a downer, but they're really important stories, and we need to talk about them. So this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese and herring?
WIDR Kalamazoo.
This is a tasty burger.
Voting is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and, in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Okay, everybody, we are back. Hold on just a second. Get that background music going. Yeah, there you go. All right, so again, so I mentioned we're gonna close on a little downer, but it's important, and I wanted to make sure we talked about it at least a little bit, especially dig a little bit deeper into it, because I know a lot of people have seen the headline. Climate report says world will end by 2050. That's very vague. Doesn't really go into what that actually means. So I wanted to talk a little bit. You can find the actual policy paper, and it's only about 12 pages long. So again, it's not a huge read, but I really appreciate it. It's from the National Center for Climate Restoration. And it's written by David Spratt. He's a research director for the climate restoration place, and Ian Dunlop. He's a member of the Club of Rome. He was formerly an international oil, gas, and coal industry executive. So, I mean, who knows better about, how screwed we are than an oil executive? I mean, really. Yeah. And I'm not being facetious at all. Like, good example, Exxon had a lot of this research about what their activities would do to the climate decades before the general public did. So, these are, again, two people who really know their stuff. And what I really appreciate about this report, and while it is a little depressing and dire, I am glad that they took it upon themselves to actually do some, because, what the report itself is called a scenario approach. So often when we talk about climate change, even those of us who understand how dire and imminent the crisis is, it's still very abstract to us. It's like, if we don't fix the climate in 10 years, we're going to go extinct, or things are going to get really bad. What I appreciate about this is it explains to you how it's going to get bad, what kind of things are, how the things will unravel if we do not make the next necessary fixes that we need to make. So, I'm sorry, did you have something? No? Okay. Sorry, I thought you saw you raise your fingers.
No, right. I'm about to cross-reference the exact the article here.
Okay, but I found it at the New York Post article. But again, lots of different news organizations have been publishing stories about this. But again, I highly recommend reading the actual policy paper, which they link to. I'm just going to read a little bit from page 8 of this document. And this is when they're going over the actual scenarios. And this is why they say, like, civilization can start collapsing around 2050. So, I'm going to go down, talk a little bit about... so this is their scenario. If this is a no Green New Deal, no change to business as usual... This is like their projection of what will happen to kind of civilization and society overall. So they talk about, they divide it up by years. So 2030 to 2050, emissions peak in 2030, start to fall consistent with an 80% reduction in fossil fuel energy intensity by 2100. This leads to warming of 2.4 degrees Celsius by 2050. Consistent with the quote-unquote baseline scenario. However, another 0.6 degrees Celsius of warming occurs, taking the total to 3 degrees, due to the activation of a number of carbon cycle feedbacks and higher levels of ice, albedo, and cloud feedbacks than current models assume. It should be noted that this is far from an extreme scenario. The low probability, high impact warming can exceed 3.5 to 4 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. So let me real quick break down. So 3 degrees Celsius is about... So the difference between 3 degrees Celsius, 4 degrees Celsius, it's an additional... About 2 degrees, about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, going back to the article here, by 2050, there's broad scientific acceptance that system tipping points for the West Antarctic ice sheet and sea ice-free Arctic summer were passed well before 1.5 degrees of warming. The hothouse Earth scenario has been realized, and Earth is headed for another degree or more of warming, especially since human greenhouse emissions are still significant. 35% of the global land area and 55% of the global population are subject to more than 20 days a year of lethal heat conditions beyond the threshold of human survivability. The destabilization of the jet stream has very significantly affected the intensity and geographical distribution of the Asian and West African monsoons, and together with the further slowing of the Gulf Stream, is impinging on life support systems in Europe. North America suffers from devastating weather extremes, including wildfires, heat waves, drought, and inundation. The summer monsoons in China have failed, and water flows into the Great River of Asia are severely reduced by the loss of ice. So the picture it's painting is like these are the climate impacts that are going to be happening. And it goes on to talk a little bit about what that actually means geopolitically. Most regions of the world see a significant drop in food production and increasing numbers of extreme weather events, including heat waves, floods, and storms. Food production is inadequate to feed the global population, and food prices skyrocket as a consequence of a 1/5 decline in crop yields, a decline in the nutrition content of food crops, a catastrophic decline in insect populations, desertification, monsoon failure, and chronic water shortages, and conditions too hot for human habitation in significant food-growing regions. So they go on to talk about the national security consequences. Massive nonlinear events in the global environment give rise to massive societal events. In this scenario, nations around the world will be overwhelmed by the scale of change and pernicious challenges such as pandemic disease. The internal cohesion of nations will be under great stress, including in the U.S., both as a result of dramatic rise in migration and changes in agricultural patterns and water availability. The flooding of coastal communities around the world has the potential to challenge regional and even national identities. Armed conflict between nations over resources, such as the Nile and its tributaries, is likely, and nuclear war is possible. The social consequences range from increased religious fervor to outright chaos. In this scenario, climate change provokes a permanent shift in the relationship of humankind to nature. So yeah, it talks about like some of these baseline things that we really take for granted for propping up civilization will no longer be tenable after 2050. That's what they're getting at with the crux of this
I plan on
paper.
being alive in 2050.
I hope so. As people have commented, well, if the world ends in 2050, there won't be a 42069. Yeah. So again, I encourage everybody to read it. It is kind of depressing, but it really gets to some very...
Yeah, it does, and it gives pretty explicit policy recommendations at the bottom here.
Yeah, it does.
It says recognize the limitations of policy-relevant climate change research, which may exhibit scientific, reticence. Urgently examine the role that the national security sector can play in providing leadership and capacity for a near-term society-wide emergency mobilization of labor and resources. It says, national security sector, can play a role in educating policymakers on the existential threat that failing to combat these risks face. And it struck me. Did you watch the Piers Morgan interview yesterday with Trump?
I did not get a chance to.
He was mentioned. He was talking about is Prince Harry over there, and his continued commitment to the awareness of this issue of climate change. And it's interesting how, I don't know the what you would call this, but he just, that Donald J. Trump, he just molds to wherever he is from, to wherever he is. And I could just imagine him, nodding his head, yes, 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 yes. He told Piers, he's like, I was listening, I was really hearing this guy out, and then going right back into his like-minded buddies and saying something completely different. It's so interesting to me how he is just such a chameleon. I remember in my, going on my entertainment realm here, I remember when he had Kanye West in the Oval Office, and Kanye told him, I came here because Rahm and his right-hand man told me to tell you that we cannot continue to pursue stop and frisk. And Trump looked Kanye dead in the eye and said, hey, that's something that I can take a look at.
Yeah,
which, once he leaves, hell no.
Oh, yeah,
It's just, it's such,
something that's telling to me is like, the people who've written about Trump, particularly Trump's presidency, have mentioned his policies always most closely resemble those of the last person
he was talking to. Yes, exactly.
And it does boil down to, as awful as Trump is, you can't really fault him for being an ideologue because he doesn't really have any ideologies other than being a con man, which isn't really an ideology so much as it is just making money. And I will say a little bit of a silver lining, to not be all doom and gloom. I think this has precipitated movements, not so much here in America, but the recent European elections were very substantial on this issue. So, unfortunately, a lot of people on the far right, particularly in Britain, got seats in European Parliament. But it was also a very interesting scenario where the Greens the Green Party over in Europe swept a hell of a lot of seats running explicitly on the climate crisis. So I think there is a space, particularly in Europe, other parts of the world, where you can get a really like militant movement around climate change. I would be cynical to say, I think what we really need is an eco-socialist revolution, and I do mean revolution with a capital R. I do think that's possible. Something that always gives me hope. I've been thinking a lot about that quote from Lenin lately. This little thing that happened in Russia in 1917, you might have heard about it. But one of his famous quotes, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. So, well, we only got like 10 years to fix this. It's possible. I mean, huge sweeping changes have happened on those time scales before.
They have.
I think the realistically looking at it, that kind of movement centered on climate is sure as hell ain't going to start in the United States.
No.
I think the seeds for it are active in Europe.
We need it to start to, get traction in that conservative Republican base. Like it cannot be over politicized to the sense of it is, because it's so black and white. I mean, you can either see it or you can say, hey,
Yeah, and it's rough because like I was thinking about it. It's like all these Greens won on a platform explicitly centered on climate change. It's like I would never think of like in America somebody running as that's their top issue, just because like there's that reactionary propaganda runs real damn deep in the United States. And I'm not just talking about climate deniers. I'm talking about even there's a complicity of a lot of these Democratic Party centrists that downplay the crisis and say that we don't need these sweeping changes, and a lot of people listen to that too. So it's a huge problem, and I think something also we need to be aware of, that the government is continuing to crack down. Another story that we only got 5 minutes, but I did just want to mention there's a proposal under the Trump administration that pipeline protesters could face up to 20 years in prison. It's building on efforts by multiple states to crack down on those fighting construction of climate-destroying fossil fuel infrastructure. The Trump administration unveiled a proposal on Monday that would criminalize pipeline protests at the federal level and hit demonstrators with up to 20 years in prison. And yeah, it's rough. We're looking at we've got to change the way our civilization functions in a very, very short amount of time. Yeah. And particularly in the United States, we got retrograde forces that are trying to stop it at all costs. It hits me in particular. I was at Standing Rock myself. It's crazy to think that, like, if we were trying to do something like that again, this administration would try to throw us in prison for decades at a time. It's building on other things, trying to basically paint water protectors as terrorists. But I think it's important to understand that's the reality. This is what we got to do, and this is what the enemy, the opposing side, is trying to throw at us to keep us from doing it.
Yeah.
So, I think with that, we'll go ahead, wrap up the show. I want to make sure, did you have any other thoughts on this issue or just anything else that maybe you wanted to talk about? Again, thank you for joining us. You're going to be having a show coming up pretty soon on Wider, is that right?
Yes, it is. Again, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on the show. I know Kirk, our production manager, director, whatever the heck his title is now, kind of threw this at you short notice, so I appreciate you taking me in here today. But yeah, we're going to be having a show that is yet to be titled. If you have any name titles, throw them at me. I'm on Twitter at Samuel Robinson J. And it's going to kind of be adjacent to what I have been doing my freelance writing on. So we're going to keep it within sports, entertainment, pop culture. And we don't have a set timetable, but I'm hoping to get it up and running before the end of the week after next. So keep an eye out for that. Obviously, we can't give you a title to plug the name here because I haven't thought of one yet. So again, if you guys have any good title names for a show, let me know. But other than that, I got nothing much else.
Well, I will certainly be anticipating that, and I will be tuning in. Before we close out the show, again, wanted to do our little activist calendar, let y'all know what's going on in the community, to fill your social justice appetites, bones, whatever you want to call it. So on of course, Pride is this weekend. There's going to be a lot of really great vendors down there. Again, we had a little talk about rainbow capitalism and whatnot, but there are some really important groups, such as Out Front, who table at Pride, and they'll be there to like talk about their work. On Sunday, over at the Boiling Point, there's the Punk Rock Flea Market and Show. It's going to be going on all day from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's going to be a lot of different vendors there, a lot of different tables with local activist groups, people selling their wares, performances from Ruche, Jitus and Jarga, Chit Hold'ems, and Clayton Cole Slauson and company. And it's going to be a fundraiser, again, for the Boiling Point, which has served very well over the last year as kind of a community space for local grassroots and radical organizations to host their meetings and events. So again, that's Sunday from 3 p.m. till 10 p.m. And doesn't look like there's a whole lot of other stuff going on this weekend. I will let you know, JABS, that's Justice Against Bullying in Schools, is they're doing a bullying awareness month. If you look up more about that, again, look up JABS, that's Justice Against Bullying in Schools. Until next time, we're going to go ahead and close out the show. Until next time, thank y'all for tuning in, and please keep on fighting for that revolution solution.